Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, well, is this thing on? Yeah, it must be. It is my pleasure to introduce Telle Whitney, who will be giving our Anita Borg Distinguished Lecture for Women in Technology. I've known Telle only for a short time, heard about Telle for years. Wonderful things. In fact, I was realizing that I've only heard wonderful things about Telle because we were trying to think of some embarrassing anecdote we could tell about her, and I realized that I hadn't heard of any embarrassing anecdote. So I figured I'd just make one up. No, I won't do that. But I will make sure that the next time I introduce you, I have an embarrassing anecdote. I'll either get it from Maria Clave, or we'll figure out some way to put you in a compromising position where you can embarrass yourself. But for now, Telle is the president and the CEO of the Anita Borg Institute. She had a long and distinguished career as a technologist. She was in various companies, including some small startup-type companies that eventually got bought by PNC Sierra. The last one she was at eventually was bought by PNC Sierra. And I'm sure she did wonderful work there, but I'm really excited about what she's doing now because she is really changing the face of technology, and she's really changing the experience for women in technology. She's had a huge impact on me personally and on other people I've seen. So it is my pleasure to welcome Telle Whitney.
Okay, so is this on? Okay. Wow. How do I live up to that? So it is a real pleasure to be here. I can't tell you how excited I am, the chance to talk to you. As Jennifer says, I am a technologist. My name is Telle Whitney, and I am a technologist. I get really excited about building products. Mostly I have a PhD in computer science from Caltech. Mostly I've worked in the chip industry. So I used to get so excited about green lines and red lines and making chips and seeing how they functioned. I'm also an entrepreneur. I love creating something from scratch, and I've done that in a lot of different incarnations throughout my career, trying to figure out how to do the things that people say you can't do is actually something that I love to do. And the last position I was at, I was VP of Engineering at Malleable Technology. We made a voice-over IP processor, and it was a lot of fun. But like probably many of you, as I was working in the technology industry, when I looked around the table, I was the only woman. And I was focused enough on the technology that was fine because I loved what I was doing, but the way that I handled that was that I had this great group of women friends. In the Bay Area, one of the real blessings is that there's these women doing really just interesting things. And so we would get together, and that was the way I kept sane while doing some of the crazy stuff I did at work. One of my best friends was Anita Borg, and I met Anita when I moved to the Bay Area in 1986. And we would get together, and we would go hiking, and we would go backpacking, and we would talk about technologies, and we would talk about our personal life, and we would just talk about everything. And one of the things that we talked about was the lack of women in technology. And so in 1993, she and I decided to do something about it, and we created this conference called the Grace Hopper Celebration, and it was a lot of fun. And so I was really excited when she decided to create this nonprofit called the Institute for Women in Technology, and I was very supportive, and we talked about it, and it was great. I was also really sad when I got the call from her when she was diagnosed with brain cancer. And so 2 years ago, as she was about ready to go into her surgery for her brain cancer, something that she lost, the battle with cancer a year ago, she needed a president for the Institute, and I was actually very reticent to take this on. I mean, my whole identity was tied up with being a technologist. But I said that I would do it for her, and I did it at first on an interim basis, and I love what I do. I had this chance to work with all these people to really make a difference in the world, and so I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I feel very blessed that I'm able to have a job like I have now. And so I thought that I would start the talk by letting you hear from Anita about her vision.
This is really, really hard work. But I cannot think of anything that I could spend the rest of my life engaged in that would be more exciting and would have more potential to make a tremendous impact. And I can think of no challenge that would draw young women into this field greater than knowing that what they're doing is not sitting in a lab doing stuff that is disconnected from the world. They're sitting in a lab doing something that is very, very connected, and they can bring their whole selves to it, their full sense of what the world is, the intuition that we're so famous for.
Oops. Catalyst came out with a study this spring that I think is pretty compelling. And, first of all, they only have access to the public data. But there's 2 points that I think were very interesting about there were 2 separate studies. One is that in technology companies, we tend to think of ourselves as a meritocracy, and that the best people are promoted. But in fact, the number of women that are in the board seats and as corporate officers are actually less than Fortune 500 companies, which was, I have to say, I was surprised by. I really thought that there would be more women in technology. The other thing that Catalyst found is that companies that had a better representation of women in their top management actually had better financial performance. Catalyst wouldn't say that this is cause and effect, but I actually think that the companies that are the most progressive, the companies that are the most far-reaching thinkers, also include women as part of the decision-making process. And so I personally believe that there's a very good business argument for having more women present in the most senior positions. The Anita Borg Institute, as an organization, is about changing the participation of women in technology, which I think will change the face of technology, but also to change the influence of women on technology. And I think that those 2 pieces of what we do are really important. We're about bringing women's voices, ideas, and spirits to influence technology. And we do that by working with academia. We do that by working with industry. And one of the things that makes us very unique is we bring those 2 groups together. And so, in fact, in a number of the programs that I'll be talking about in a few minutes, you will see that we have the participation of both academia and industry, which is, in my experience, quite unusual. We also provide events, awards, and just celebrate the women that are making a difference today. I think that we all too often don't see enough of them, and there are some pretty wonderful women doing great things right now. Putting this into a more visual presentation of all of our programs, I think of this kind of as a pipeline going across this page, and it starts with the Sisters Online community, which I will talk about more in depth, but this is a place where women can come to talk about the issues about being a woman. and a technologist. We also include the Grace Hopper, which really helps students. Well, it helps a lot of people, but we also bring students and faculty and industry folks to come together and talk about the exciting technology that they're working on. And it's a very inspiring event. The VDC, which is represented by the students talking to Sally Ride, who was one of our earliest speakers at the VDC, really brings a different perspective in terms of undergraduate classes, where the students are actually able to work with the community groups that they serve. And our most important new initiative, which is on leadership, to train the leaders of tomorrow, because I think that that's a place where all too often women are entering the workforce, but they really are not moving into leadership. And I actually define leadership pretty broadly. I think that all of us are leaders in our own realm. The other important point I want to make about this is that we are all about drawing a parallel of the way that technology influences society. That we have all of this really interesting and fascinating technology that really does have an impact on the world around us. And the more that we can actually draw that line and demonstrate how this does help the world, I think that that draws a different kind of person into technology. It attracts them. And in particular, I really feel like women are more drawn, where you actually show why technology matters. And it does. So now I'm going to go back and really talk a little bit more in depth about some of our programs. And I'll start with Sisters. Sisters was created in 1987. It's an online community. Right now we have 3,500 members. It's becoming increasingly international. There are 53 countries represented. You hear women talk about how sisters changed their lives. There was a woman researcher from AT&T that it was a place to go when she had a real concern about her career. The advice that she got on the Sisters mailing list allowed her to make some different choices, which now, many years later, has affected the way that she's approached her career. One of the things I also wanted to make sure that all of you were aware is that we are increasingly including a diverse set of very specialized lists. And in fact, we have a new group called Researchers, which is for researchers, but particularly industry researchers. And that's moderated by a woman named Susan Landau. And she'd love to hear from all of you if you'd like to join. And now I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the Grace Hopper Conference. And the first thing that I want to point out to you is that it is coming up. It's in October 6th through the 9th. It's in Chicago. It's a great location. It's in the Sheraton right on the lake. You're in the heart of Chicago. It's Microsoft is a gold sponsor, and we're thrilled to have you there. The first Grace Hopper I went to, you walk into this room and you look around, and I mean, I had always worked almost exclusively with men, and there was 500 women. And it wasn't just the fact that there was 500 women. These were technologists, and people weren't talking about the women's issue or the problems here. They were really talking about how excited they were about the technology that they were working on. And it's the effect that it has on attendees is amazing. I've listed the 3 keynotes. At the bottom here, I've also listed our gold and silver sponsors for this year. I also wanted to point out some quotes from students. These are mostly from students who have come to conferences in the past. And it's to be able to come and hear for the first time that the issues that you are having as you think about technology are really much more prevalent than you had ever imagined is an amazing experience. And at this point, there's a lot of different kinds of programs. This year, our panels, actually, I think I have one, just to give you a sense of the kinds of things that we have is we have a set of, in addition to the keynotes, we have a set of invited speakers, which are all technical talks. Cynthia Dwork will be one of those speakers. We also have a full set of panels, and there's a number of different things. In essence, we have an industry track, which includes panels that are more of interest to some of our industry attendees. We also have an academic track. We also have a technical track. So much more, we have a lot of panels that are focused on technology. We also have a very large set of papers from both PhD students and young investigators. There is often so many things to do, it's a little overwhelming. But I did include a few of the panels, but especially those that included Microsoft. We have one on getting ahead in your career, which actually looks like a great panel, with Barbara Fox, who's part of that. We have an entry-level mentoring with Nuria Oliver. Is that how you say it? And then a few other of the various kinds of panels. It's hard to explain Hoffer. You really have to experience it. So many people that I see on a regular basis walk up to me and they say, you know, Hoffer changed my life. And I think that is showing up in a new program that we introduced this year, which is a sponsorship program by academic institutions. And what this allows is the academic institutions come in as a sponsor, and then we then sponsor some of their students to attend the conference from their institution. And the response has been stunning. I had no idea, because we really haven't advertised it. We wanted to see how well this works, and these are the academic institutions that are sponsoring their students. It's really a surprisingly large list. One of the members of the fundraising committee is from UC Irvine. She's the dean of IT there, and she has managed to get every single UC campus, the University of California, to be a sponsor. So it's amazing. And this isn't just, it may be surprising to me, but in fact, the reason why academic institutions are doing this is that they have watched the impact of this conference on their students. Men and women attend the conference. We have a lot of educators, and increasingly quite a few men attend, because they see how this impacts their students, and they're very interested. I pointed out some of the panels, but I will say that we've made a conscious effort to have a program that is targeted for our industry folks. Something that, with my background, obviously this is of interest to me. And so we put together an industry advisory group that helped us set this. And Rebecca Norlander was part of that. And the results of that group has really been very positive. So I'm very pleased with it. It's actually working. One of our newest ideas is 2 new awards named in Anita's memory, because I don't feel like women get the recognition that they so deserve in many cases. And so we have 2 new awards, and they will both be presented at Hoffer. I have been pleased and stunned by the response. We have 2 awards. The first is the Anita Borg Technical Leadership, which recognizes a woman technologist for both technological and social contributions. It will be announced in September, and the first award will be given at Hoffer at the awards banquet, which is on Thursday night. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, and what I'm very excited about, is the Anita Borg Social Impact Award. Microsoft is sponsoring this. Both of these carry a $10,000 prize, and this recognizes achievements by an individual or team who has increased the positive impact on technology. As I said, for the Institute, we really have this 2-pronged message that I think is really important, and part of what we want to do is publicize and celebrate the people who are making a difference in people's lives with their technology. Now, we're announcing the winner in September. Those in the know, since Microsoft is sponsoring it, actually do know who it is. And I think it's a lot more international than I thought was going to happen. So I think that we're going to, I think that there will be a lot of positive feedback by the winners of these two awards. We will also, these are the two things that we will award at the banquet. Talking about the Anita Borg Social Impact Award is a nice segue into one of our most innovative programs, which is the Virtual Development Center. And the Virtual Development Center came about because we wanted to be able to look at developing technologies that had an impact on communities. And so that's what the VDC does. And we work currently with 9 universities. We're this summer talking to 2 additional universities that we expect either both of them will come on for next year or one will come on this year and then another one next year. And it starts out by having a brainstorming session, a very structured brainstorming session where you bring in the community group, you bring in the faculty, and you bring in the students and other interested parties to talk about technology that will help the community groups. And I can tell you that one of the most important lessons that the technologists learn is that some of the best ideas come from the community groups, come from the people who are non-technologists. And the point of this structured brainstorming is that you're putting everybody on an equal footing, where you all listen to the other's ideas. And it's a wonderful experience. The result of the brainstorming session is a set of projects that the students then work on over the course of the year, continuing to work with the community group and see how they may use those. And just to give you some of the examples of some projects that I found wonderful. This works well with programs that are already thinking about computing in a larger context. And so at the University of Colorado, they have a technology, arts, and media major where they are already bringing technologists together with people from a diverse population at the university. In this particular case, on this project, there was computer scientists, political scientists, economists, and business students. They're looking to create a space at the university where people can come together and talk about new ideas. And so that was really the project that they were creating. The technical skills, the makeup of the team was 45% female, 55% men. They came half and half from engineering and arts and scientists. And there was a young woman who was from the University of Colorado who came to me after this, at the VDC conference and said, I want to change the world. And she was a political science major, but through the course of taking the VDC and some of what she learned at this technology, arts, and media, she really wanted to know more and more about computing, about programming. She was realizing how much she wanted to develop her technical skills. But it was really by realizing that and seeing that she could take those technical skills and apply them to changing the world that she was now interested in the major. And I think that she's a great example of a different kind of student that we have a chance and potential of attracting into computer science and technology. The other example is at the University of Washington, and as I'm sure all of you know, the University of Washington has a lot of innovative ways of thinking about the students and bringing in different kinds of students into technology. And for the VDC, what we do, the VDC there works very closely with a major called Technical Communications. Now, Technical Communications has a very strong technology component. The students have to be well schooled in math and science, but they are combining computer science with communication skills. And so these students come in with a very different background, and they're very poised, and they were great. They developed a flash program where you could fly over Mars. So students, middle school students, which is their community, could actually experience what it would be like to be on Mars. The BDC, I should say, is it's been in existence since '99, but it's grown gradually over the course of the last few years, and I continue to be amazed at the way that students who go through the BDC program approach the rest of their classes with a different perspective. One of the things that we want to do at the Anita Borg Institute is partner with other initiatives that have common themes, and certainly the EPICS, the one at Purdue, the BDC at Purdue, is part of the EPICS program, which is a larger service learning program. And we continue to talk to other initiatives, and I just think that there's a lot of potential for this kind of thinking. A couple of other things I wanted to tell you about. The one that I'm really excited about is our new leadership initiative. I think that leadership is important for all of us. And I think that all too often what's happening is that women in particular, but I mean actually men and women, they get to a certain point in their career and they leave. Now, they often say they're leaving because of balance reasons and all kinds of different reasons, but in fact, they're just simply unhappy. They don't feel like whatever situation they're in is working for them. And by having the opportunity at that particular time to have a perspective from a lot of different people, from a diverse population, academia, people from other companies, I think that there's a lot of skill development that can really help you at that crucial time, that can really help you to see how to influence the world around you. And that's really what I mean by leadership. You can change yourself, you can change your community, and you can change your life. And it's not management. I mean, leadership is not about management. And I think that all too often we think of a leader as somebody like Carly Fiorini, who's leading a large HP. But in fact, if you can learn skills so that you can influence the group down the hall that's developing a comparable product, or who is writing the documentation, if you can learn to articulate your vision so that somebody in the next building understands it, and they start to think about that as a potential new product, that is leadership. Our pilot leadership workshop was at UCLA last January, and we decided to start with the most senior women in our community, and we have a pretty strong community of technical women. We had 5 deans of engineering at this. There was about 50 people. We had directors and VPs from most of the industry that we often talk to. It was, and we actually took notes, and the results of that are on this the URL that I've listed here. And by the way, I can make these available. I need to remove the video just because the file will be too large otherwise, but I can send that out if anybody. I see some people taking notes, but I can make those available.
It should actually get archived with hopefully.
Okay.
We should be able to access it.
Okay, cool. That's great. Technology. And the attendees just walked away with a really feeling like they had the chance to connect with people that they just had not met. Many of them had not met each other, and they wanted to come back. They just, more than anything else, we heard, let's do this every year. I thought I would go through a couple of examples of the kinds of things that came up at this workshop. And and what women particularly might need some coaching in terms of leadership. And I think that the first one is that this group of 50 women, the number one thing they wanted was to learn how to negotiate. Now, these are women that I would have thought, could teach their class on negotiation, but that's what they want to learn. And I have, there's a wonderful book called Women Don't Ask, which I think the authors were here recently, and they, the point they made when I saw them speak about 6 weeks ago was that if that first negotiation where you actually ask for your first starting salary, if you decide not to have that conversation and you just take what's offered, and I think that 70% of women don't negotiate that first salary and 70% of men do, nothing else changes. All future raises are strictly based on merit. There's no difference whatsoever. Over the course of the next 20 years, you will make significantly less money. Something like, I don't know what the numbers were, but 40%, 30% less money. A huge difference just by that one conversation. And I have a story along these lines. When I went to Malleable Technology, it was a startup. I was the fourth person there. And the person, the founder and CEO, was somebody I knew. Not well, but I knew him. And when you go to a startup, the thing that you care about is the stock. The salaries, we talked about the salary. It was just something comparable to what I was making. But what really mattered was the stock. So he gave me an offer, and it was great. Actually, it was a nice, I felt like, substantive offer, and I said yes. 2 years later, when we were bought by PMC Sierra, everybody's stock ownings became public. So that becomes a public piece of information. And so the way that Malleable was formed is that there was 3 executives. It was the CEO, who I just mentioned, myself, and then the VP of marketing. The rest of the company, which is all the engineers, I knew what they had because I hired them. Literally everybody in the company I had hired, except for 1 or 2 marketing engineers. Well, imagine my surprise when I saw what the VP of marketing had in terms of stock. And there was some significant differences. And when I went to the CEO and I asked why, guess what he said? He did. And he had built in, at the time, some room for negotiation. And I had assumed he would take care of me. Still pretty annoying. So I have some personal experience with this one. The other key point I wanted to make is learning to be your own PR agent. One of the things I'm having a great time with right now is we're interviewing a set of women leaders as part of our newsletter, and I just interviewed the CEO of a company in Silicon Valley. Her name is Penny Hersher. And when she talks about the women that, she had done a great job in terms of setting the culture at the company she was at, which was Simplex. And she talked about how many women she watched at the mid-level where they were doing an outstanding job, but when she talked to them, they would say, oh, well, it wasn't me, it was Joe down the hall, it was, Harry over in marketing. Everybody else was going to get credit except for them. And I think that we need to learn to become our own PR agent. And we need to ask. This once again gets to the asking part, right? But who else knows how well you are doing except for you? You're the one that really sees how the difference you're making in the world around you. Nobody else it does. And so taking risks, being able to say, this is what I want to do, is something that I think that people in general, but certainly women, would really benefit by developing these skills. And I don't know if you're going to talk at all about the fact that
some of the women I know who do ask have horrible reputations for being pushy and self-promoting, and, so.
That's kind
kind of so you learn how to do it, and then you're kind of lumped in with
The pushy.
yeah.
I think that there's some truth to that. I mean, certainly, in my lifetime, I've been labeled as being very ambitious, and I've certainly heard that seemingly more frequently with women who do want to get ahead. I personally don't feel like Carly, if she had been a man, would have taken nearly the flack that she did during the compact merger. She really took it in the shorts in the press, and I think that she was just considered too pushy. But we do need to change the culture, and I think that the more that we learn to ask for what we want, that the actual benefit is positive. I'm not going to really spend a lot of time here. I think that there are simple things that all of us can do in terms of learning to be leaders, looking for people that have what we want. And I think you might be surprised how often if you see somebody who you really respect and you go up and ask them to meet with you on occasion, but almost always they say yes. I mean, people are flattered when you ask for their help. I mean, that's not 100% true, but it's more true than you might have possibly imagined. So, with our leadership initiative, we've got 3 thrusts, and we're further along in the first one, which is really bringing the senior women together. And our idea is to bring both experts in leadership training together with a very semi-structured approach. In UCLA, although we had sessions, they were really bringing the women together to talk to each other. They are senior enough; they don't really want to listen to a lecture. So you want to be able to learn from each other, and but also have some skill development as part of that. And we currently have a leadership workshop scheduled on the East Coast next spring. We're looking to schedule one in the West Coast next year. And Microsoft, I'm not sure that I said this, but I should say this now, is Microsoft has been a significant sponsor of the Anita Borg Institute. They've really been, from almost the beginning, very supportive. And so we'd love to be able to work with Microsoft, and whatever ways make sense. And certainly with this leadership training, trying to figure out if we can do something together is a conversation that we're having. The real win for the leadership initiative, however, is in the up-and-coming leaders. And I think that we are looking to schedule one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast in the next year or so that really has to do with bringing together a group of women who are about ready to take that next jump, to bring them together with more senior women, and have, the structure will evolve a little bit from the one that we piloted in UCLA, but that we would like to pilot that. And so I think that that's something that I'm really excited about. The other thing that I find fascinating is I think that we can work at the student level. We've had some interest in a couple of universities of having a much more structured leadership workshop as part of their undergraduate research, where once again you can bring in some people that are much further along in their career and talk about what works. And so I'm very excited about all of this. If I was to say the kinds of topics that we would include in these workshops, I just wanted to name a few of them. Certainly negotiation and communication. The one at Hopper is it's facilitated by a woman who's done many leadership workshops about designing your future and thinking about, okay, so if I was to start from, if anything was possible, what would it look like? And if you can really, they have a technique where if you can imagine your future, that you can actually figure out how to get there. It's fascinating way of thinking about things. And then the leadership models that I had mentioned a few minutes ago. One of my beliefs is that we cannot do it alone, and that the more that we can work together with like-minded people by collaborating with groups that have similar objectives, the sooner that we can get there. And one of the most exciting efforts that is happening is something called the National Center for Women in IT. It came out of the University of Colorado. The Anita Borg Institute was one of the founding organizations. We just got an NSF grant, $3.5 million, the largest workforce grant out of the computing size division at NSF ever. CRA, which has done some incredible work on women faculty as part of this initiative, Georgia Tech, University of Colorado. Microsoft is part of the Industry Alliance. Debbie Sterling, who is here today, she's been great. And the Girl Scouts of the USA. The intention is to have focused research efforts at every level of the pipeline. So, for example, Girl Scouts obviously is going to do K through 12. The Anita Borg Institute is looking at the industry piece. We have CRAW is working at the graduate students, and but to be able to take best practices as you can figure them out and widely disseminate them. To also, in fact, that's the next slide. To be able to also, though, be able to include assessment as part of the general approach so that you can actually say, this is a good idea because blah, 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 rather than saying, oh, I just think this is way cool. I mean, so I do think that building assessment in is really an important part of how we go forward. We have something called the Social Science Network that's part of the National Center that will help us articulate why and to look at assessment in general. So I'm very excited about that. And I think that it's just being launched. We just got our funding. So, and yet the team has come together, and I'm very optimistic. So, I'd like to say a few things in closing. That we see ourselves as a resource to each of you, and we provide a number of programs and events where we bring together groups of people that you probably would not ordinarily have access to understand about the kinds of things that can help you in your career. And I think that I would encourage all of you to take advantage of the opportunities that are around you, and that skill development is also an important part of your career, and that it's important. I can't tell you how important it is that some of us actually really take senior leadership positions in companies like Microsoft and look at changing the culture to something that is more inclusive. But that is the way that we can really have an impact on the technology of the future. And I think that there's a lot of people who want to do it differently. I mean, Rick Rashid is on our board. I know that as head of Microsoft Research, he's very committed to making a difference. I think that in a large company, it's harder to know how to change the culture, but that it's important to us as a society that the real movers and shakers do it differently, that will result in better technology. I'll end with a couple of quotes. One of our board members is Greg Papadopoulos from Sun, who's the CTO there. And he often talks about engineering as a creative art. That we as a whole will benefit from women's participation in technology development. I have a story, unfortunately, of how women's participation can negatively impact technology. A very good friend of mine is the CEO of a company that does a medical device, and an important part of the device is voice recognition. And she got this, and the QA went to it, and it kept failing on women's voices. Well, it turns out that they had bought the software and all of the testing had been done, or virtually all the software testing had been done with male voices, and so they had all these nurses that they were trying to support, and it didn't work very well. But I think that's, my colleagues in the medical profession say that as more women became doctors, that there was a shift in the kind of thinking that you saw in the community that really was a medical community, and that there was much more thinking about the world at large and how medical profession can help the community around them, and how just taking social impact into account. And so I think that as a profession, this is advantageous. And certainly my friend Anita believes passionately that women really need to be part of designing their future. So thank you for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Yes?
So I'm really interested in what the Institute does, and I'm going back to school for a technology policy program, and I'm wondering what kind of partnerships you have with governments, because I think one of the things that's important is to sort of influence technology strategies and policies and where they're set up so they're more able to influence women or include women participation.
That's such a great question. So as part of the National Center, we're looking at developing a whole technology policy arm. And we're starting by working with two groups that really have significant policy presence in Washington, the ACM, which is one of our partners, and also CRA. And so we're just in some early discussions about, okay, so what kind of stances do we want to take? But I definitely agree with you that it's an important part of the future. I think it was Ron Whitney from Oregon that's really come out in support of Title IX, that's really been more sports-based, but to try and have science education being more accessible to women. So there's some very interesting policy decisions. But we don't actually have an active group right now, but are working to do that with the National Center. Yes?
I was recently looking at literature on gender differences in software, and there was a huge peak around the early 90s. And it seems to have pretty much disappeared since, and all of the focus is on getting women into the pipeline, various pipelines. And it seems kind of ironic to me at the point where there really is some neurobiology now, to support what the differences are, if there's not much interest, I think, maybe since the failure of Purple Moon, in, whether there is any creative or, how do I even describe it, statistical or scientific way to approach those differences.
I mean, in terms of software development?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you aware of anything going on there? Is the Institute doing anything around it?
Certainly not in terms of software development, but that is an interesting question. And I do think that, it's always really difficult to do gender differences in terms of, how trying to have a control group versus women only. And I think it's tricky, but I'm not aware of anything right now.
Small-scale studies at both Oregon State and Cornell right now that are doing that actually I was going to talk to Telle about later on. So there are some small.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
My question, you had a slide about the research project using what you have some diagram with. Can you go back to that? Yeah, that one. This one.
Okay.
So exactly like in the education, because I have attended some of these meetings, and it seems that this issue is arising from, this part of it is arising from the perception of women and technology, and it starts really early. So what parents and parents say or teachers say and things like that. And I wondered if the organization is specifically doing something something along those lines.
Well, there's certainly strong agreement that the image of computing is one of the biggest problems that we have.
Particularly in this country.
Yes, particularly in this country. And we have embarked on an image campaign effort that with ACM, and in fact ACM has just agreed to do a study, a fairly large-scale study, in terms of looking at the kinds of approaches that might actually impact young girls in middle school, which is often where girls start losing interest in that. So certainly there is some image work, and that's actually a collaborative effort. Microsoft is involved, and Telle is involved, and to try and look at, the hard part is really trying to shift the image, and it's no small problem. I know one of our board members is a person named Bill Wolf, who's head of the National Academy of Engineering, and he went to Hollywood a few years ago to try and pitch this idea of LA engineer, and they said no. But I do think that there is some reason for optimism. CSI, for example, does have a pretty significant female scientist, and so I think that there are. You can see some examples, and biotech actually has a pretty good representation of women. So, but yes, I agree with you on the image problem. It's a hard problem, but we actually do have an effort to try and look at that. Yes.
Well, on that same line, when I see the classroom, I see boys dominating the computer. Unless the girl is really assertive and really aggressive and feels like making a fool of herself, if she doesn't know a lot about it, to dive in there and get involved, she's not going to get any time on the computer. And I've, often thought that maybe girls-only computer labs, just like we had the math-only, encouraging girls-only classes for math to encourage more, confidence with math, but, we have girls-only computer labs in the middle school.
It seems like Title IX should be able to push that.
Yeah. Right. You're right. That's one of the places where Title IX might be able to help. It's a little tricky having girls only, I have to say. A lot of federal funding. You have to be a little careful about that, but
to demand that there's an equal number of computers or that's proportionate to the student population shouldn't be a problem.
Right, and thinking about it differently, so that the women, the girls don't have to approach the computers in the same way that the boys do is, I think, one of the keys. And so trying to demonstrate different use models. But yes, happy access. I agree. Yes.
Well, I find that I feel like I'm a little bit of a traitor because I am raising two boys, and it's hard to.
That's not being a traitor. That's wonderful.
What I see is that girls in middle school and elementary school are much smarter and more advanced all throughout school on computers. My fifth grader is doing PowerPoint presentations, and I'm like, you've got to be joking me. I've got to see this. So the boys all have the basic pictures of birds and some text, and the girls have flowers and sounds, and when does that change? It's just
in middle school, and I don't have kids, but if you watch parents who talk with their kids in middle school, the peer pressure is really uncool to be a computer geek. It really is. And so, and it's around, if you remember, at least I remember when I was about 13, all of a sudden the what your peers thought became incredibly important to you, and it's at that time. This is actually another interesting point, that having re-entry kinds of programs where you actually, women are much more likely to get sucked into one of those, political science or one of those poo-poo degrees. I'm just kidding. And then much later on realize that they want technical skills, and there's not a lot of paths to get back in. And so having more re-entry programs where you come back and is also an important way, I think, of reaching a very different population. But yes, it is. It's middle school. It's about, I think it's typically about 13 where things change. But coincides with puberty, yes. I mean,
whole shift there.
Yes.
I mean, this is a hypothetical question. Suppose that we can replace all the male and, the developers by female, okay? Women.
And what?
Male developers by female, okay?
Sure.
So all the engineers and then all the software, developers are female.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of changes would you like to predict or would you like to see if that were the case?
Okay, well, I say, well, first of all, it's not, I would never preach that you want to exclude men. And
No.
Really what we're talking about is a partnership.
Yes.
I mean, absolutely. So, but I do think that every woman I know says that the room dynamics changes as you have a larger percentage of women in the room. And so when you can't actually go to schools like in Palo Alto, there's actually very technical, very high caliber high schools that are girls only. And women, if you had only women developers, I think that they would tend to be more system focused. They would more think about not just coding one particular critical path and optimizing it, but they would tend to think more of how do you both develop and test and release. That larger scale thinking tends to be more, females tend to think about that more frequently. That's the kind of thing I would expect to see in terms of the changes.
Yeah. I had another question. You had a slide earlier on about sort of public numbers about women who are in executive positions in companies. And sort of one of the issues as an employee is it's really hard to get real numbers from Microsoft.
Yes.
Is there any pressure you can put on people to say, we actually need to know what's happening in the technology companies?
One of the requests at the National Center at the Industry Alliance is to ask companies to broach the subject of, okay, so if we could bring a database where you guaranteed confidentiality, so your numbers wouldn't go to anybody else, so we would take the aggregate numbers of technical careers. It's not, it's at this point, it's just a request, and it's really, there's a large resistance to giving numbers. So the thing is that it's hard from Microsoft to get Microsoft numbers, and I think that across the industry, it's very hard to get comparable numbers from various companies. And so, but I do think that perhaps by aggregating everybody, so there would, no one company would actually be, they would know that Microsoft was such and such a number, so you could see what you're doing in terms of.
One possibility would be to try to do that in a technical way so they don't have to trust.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to trust that it is being kept anonymous. But there are actually probably relatively easy ways making it so that you really could not decipher where it came from.
That's a good point, actually. No, I get
more comfortable.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that. She was one of the co-chairs of the data collection subcommittee.
My question actually relates to the emerging program. Someone had to speak to your question about just male developers versus female developers. I wonder if we thought of it more strategically in that the people who are helping to design, strategize for the end goal, having more women involved with it, how to get there is less important than we all get to a place where we're all comfortable and we're all serving each other rather than it always being a male perspective.
Nicely put. That's very nice. I think that having the technical design is an important, and having a woman's perspective there is really is great. And in fact, one of the panels that I put together for Hopper was a CTO panel where we have CTOs, one from a large company, a small company, a CIO, because that is a pretty uncommon career path for women, that technical leadership. Yes?
I was inspired by your comments about developing skills for essentially advancement and influencing others and things like that. But along the lines of Jennifer's comment too, I wonder in your workshops whether you have any ideas for how to help women to fight the battle of perceptions, say, of being pushy or bitchy or whatever, or if there's, because in some sense a lot of the skill development could be equally, helpful for men and for women, and whether there's differences really that have been analyzed and that can be used to help women feel these situations better.
Well, I do think that there is, I think that one of the best tools we have to combat that is data. And so to be able to go into your manager and say, I want to ask for this, and this, this is the way it looks like other companies, or this is how other companies have approached it, is actually very helpful. So I do think that we can provide a fair amount of information that you can then use to combat that perception. But I also think that there's a cultural problem, and it's not, it's at lots of places and cultures shift over time, and some of that takes time to shift. So I think that those two things have to happen in tandem. Yes?
It's somewhat of a comment, and it's maybe a question to the larger group. I don't know if you guys remember at the last company meeting, we had a few speakers. It was like Steve, John Connors, and Bill, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Both Steve and John Connors made comments about the fact that they were looking to deploy some new technology that we just come out with. They were saying, wow, isn't this cool? We're going to put it in our house this weekend. My wife's not happy about it, but we're going to do it. Me and my son are going to do it. Little strange comments like that made me think, why aren't their wives happy about this? Why would a wife not be interested in having a more usable web TV unit or what have you? And it really dawned on me that we are not innovating in our company for women at all. We aren't thinking about, a lot of women, I've had this discussion over and over, we're kind of in this little rut, and we keep innovating on top of things that we know we work on, that we know we're familiar with. We have great little posters of ugly watches on men's hands. Plaster on the back of our bus and drive it all over. We're part of that whole mindset, and I'm really interested in the question that you guys had about women research, and I want to follow up with you too about that, because I really think that we have the opportunity here. We're so well funded at this company. We've got forums like this. We're capable, but we just need to break out of that mindset, and I'd love to see if we could start at some kind of, how do we think more innovatively? I want to get a vacuum cleaner, the room or whatever, where it just goes around your house and turns on, the little robot. I don't have that. I want to do it. What else could we be creating for women? What else could we be doing that would be more useful than boy toys, which is what I think we just keep clinging to. Boy toys, boy toys. I raised 2 daughters. I have all the software that we've ever made. I've given them every opportunity. They're not interested in it. They don't find it that appealing. They play with it for a while. We have every Xbox game that we've made. They're like, okay, it's fun, but whatever. I'm going to go do something with my life. We're not thinking along the lines of what interests women or girls, and we're just not there. So I'd like to see us get there, and I'm interested in talking with anybody who's interested in helping us on that.
I'll open it up to a group.
About getting some numbers out of companies. Something that won't generalize is reading the Easter eggs on Microsoft products. If you press the right magic button on Excel, out come the name of all the developers. And ditto PowerPoint and ditto Word. And most of the time you can tell managing.
Touche. That's good. Yes.
I just wanted to comment a little bit about the last observation you made, and some of the comments also about some of the issues in finding opportunities for advancement and roles for women. And it's something I've been thinking about in this company and companies in general, is to what degree is the culture and the reality of Microsoft, for example, sort of straitjacketed by its own mythology of its success. What is the incentive to change when the corporation, at the levels that it values itself, thinks it's doing a great job? So either there has to be a climate where there's a way it's perceived as a significant opportunity for Microsoft to become better by embracing a lot of what we're talking about here today, or there needs to be a crisis.
I agree with you. I think that's a really good comment.
And it's across all these issues, the products, the advancement, the culture, the team dynamic, everything. I mean, there's clearly no significant will to change. I think that there's a social ideal that some people hold, but I think the day-to-day reality is, to a certain degree, quite satisfied with itself, warts and all. Plus the inertia of, and the straitjacket of all of the demands that people face in their lives. Which may be the crisis, ultimately.
Eventually, I mean, all companies have to change, so eventually you do have to change. Now, I do think that there's ways to deal with that. I think that often pilot programs, so you have a small program where you demonstrate some different characteristics without trying to make the massive change and trying to address the whole company, and demonstrate some success, then you can take it to a larger and larger area. So things like that. And those are often just started by believers. I mean, people who just want to do it differently. Yes?
Just to speak to that, it's not, unfortunately, I don't think of it as a very big pain for the leaders of the company with women's experience here. I mean, I know that we have 23% women, and we also have higher attrition rates with women because of the cultural aspects here. And also, the executives, a lot of them have their stay-at-home wives and very lucrative careers, so they don't know the pain of having to raise children. And so we have quite a few women that leave after they have children. So that needs to change. There has to be more support for responsibilities that women have in the society. And I just don't see any way that a company will come into play, or if it's even the company's responsibility. What do you think?
Well, so something like 80% of executives in general, not just at Microsoft, but male executives have stay-at-home wives, and something like 80% of the women executives have working spouses. It's really pretty staggering, the difference. Now, executives that make this work, they have a nanny, and that's really how you have help at home. And you can develop a climate where there are different working styles, and allow them to be successful. And I think that that's one place where it can change, where you can be a great researcher and perhaps only work 4 days a week, and that you have a way of recognizing that. But the executives, they do, if you take that track, you've got to think about it differently. And we need some women to be executives. We do. Yes.
I was just going to comment on your comment. I think the only way you're going to make the companies come to the plate is you have to make it economically feasible. And, when they start feeling the pain of people leaving or something, maybe then they'll start offering more flexibility for, your situation. And I think Microsoft is slowly starting to do that way, not very fast. But that's what we have to think of, ways to make the company, economically, this is a good decision if they do this, and show how to come through with that, to bring anybody to the plate on it.
I agree.
I think a lot of the key issues facing the company are all things that the kinds of approaches you've talked to here, the more systems thinking, the more collaborative approaches, we're looking for not sort of one winning at the expense of the other. These are all the kinds of skills and viewpoints that are needed at the company. That's not how the company succeeded to date. So challenging that is changing that with people who have been successful. I think there's awareness that there's a crisis. I think that there's just not awareness or emotional willingness to see where the solution is.
Well, we don't know what the benefits would be because we haven't done it.
Right.
Great conversation. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.